Written on a piano in an empty studio. This songwriter never expected this particular song to see the light of day. After all, he was competing with two of the greatest artists ever to get even one of his songs released or out there. And yet it's since become one of the most beloved songs in the catalog of rock and roll. Meanwhile, its flipside brother is just as grand, with a large helping of nonsensical lyrics that have been dubbed gobbledygook. It's become part of our cultural lexicon, though, those words. That's right. Today we're giving you two Hall of Fame song breakdowns for the price of one. It's all coming up next on Professor Rock. Hey, music junkies. Professor Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all time. Now, if you remember buying 45s at your local store back in the day, you're going to dig this channel. Make sure that you subscribe below right now. Click the bell so you always get the daily rock and pop nostalgia just to take you back, all the way back. We also have a Patreon below. You'll want to check that out. You can become an honorary producer to help us curate more interviews, more videos, and you also get additional content. And if you watch the show, you got to get the t-shirt. Our merch is below. So it's time for another edition of our series, The New Standards. This is a show that takes an in-depth look into songs that rise above genre, decade fads, songs that have become indisputable benchmarks in our culture and in our society. Previous episodes, we've covered Hotel California by the Eagles, Mrs. Robinson by Simon & Garfunkel, and Time After Time by Cyndi Lauper. But today, we're walking it all the way back to 1969, where we're going to break down another of the Beatles' great double A-sides. Abbey Road's 1-2 punch, Come Together, and Something.
Come together right now. Something in the way she moves.
Issued on the 26th of September 1969, Abbey Road was the final Beatles album to be recorded, but not their last to be released. Of course, Let It Be, though primarily recorded in January of 69, that wouldn't see the light of day until May 1970 alongside the film with the same name. You got that coming out soon on Disney. It actually came out about a month after Paul announced his separation from the Beatles. That's definitely a subject for another episode.
A new motion picture. Let It Be.
Following the live nature of the Let It Be recordings, the Beatles returned to the North London studios for Abbey Road to create carefully crafted recordings with some ambitious musical arrangements. And it was as if, for a few brief moments in time, the Beatles decided to forego their differences. Forget about the mess that had been Let It Be. At this point, the Beatles knew, or at least suspected, that Abbey Road was going to be their last call, so they did what they could to try and make the situation work for the best. Abbey Road was, of course, named after Abbey Road, the location of EMI Studios. The cover, famous cover right there, shows each band member on a pedestrian crossing near the studio. John in a white suit is the so-called preacher, leads the pack. Ringo is in black, supposed undertaker. Paul is the barefoot corpse, if you will, and George at the end in jeans is the assumed gravedigger. Millions have scrutinized the significance of every little detail on this cover, coming to all sorts of conclusions about the cover's supposed symbolism, not the least of which has to do with my speculation before of the Paul is dead theory. I mean, my dad raised me on those compelling stories. I loved listening to that as a kid. He used to tell me how he and his friends used to make up their own urban legends about every single Beatles album that came out after. Today, that crossing is one of the most popular tourist destinations around and one of the most photographed locations in London. Abbey Road, the record, entered the British album chart at #1 in October, and it stayed there for 17 weeks. It would remain on the chart for 81 weeks overall. In the U.S., Abbey Road spent 11 weeks at #1 during its initial 83-week chart run there. As we go into this double A-side breakdown, I do want to recognize our sponsor, Zenni Eyewear. If you want to freshen up your look, Zenni is definitely the way to go. You get to design your own pair at Zenni.com. The color, the style, the shape, even the inside and outside. I got Professor Rock right here. On the inside, you can put things as well. Check it out. You can actually see how you look, too, with Zenni's mirror feature. So go to Zenni.com and check it out today.
But I don't need no other lover.
The single double A side, Something and Come Together, that was released in October of 69. So Something was actually the only song written by George Harrison to be released as a single by the Beatles. Harrison wrote it during a break while the Beatles were working on the White Album. A lot of people don't know that. Since it was not recorded in time for the album, George Harrison decided to give it to Joe Cocker, who would release it about a month after the Beatles issued Abbey Road. Seems the only reason it wasn't included on the White Album was because they'd already finished the track selection by that time. Harrison composed the title and first line after hearing James Taylor's Something in the Way She Moves.
Well, there's something in the way she moves.
Whether George Harrison consciously lifted the title and lyric from Taylor is a matter of debate, of course, but in the end, James Taylor did not mind. He was very flattered, he said, hugely flattered, I believe was what he said as he recounted it. What he said is, I had played this song for George and Paul as my audition, and I think it just sort of stuck in his mind, but he didn't realize that. I think all music is reiteration. I think we just pick stuff up and use it again. James Taylor's right on the money on that statement. According to George Harrison, there really wasn't a story behind the song. He just sat at the piano writing in an empty studio while the others were busy working on the White Album. Maybe the real story is that Harrison was just fed up with being a Beatle. For years, he had to compete with John Lennon and Paul McCartney, Lennon and McCartney, to get the music that was playing on the inside of him out and onto the albums. And he was tired of that fight. In 1971, in fact, Harrison appeared on the Dick Cavett Show, giving a, let's say, less than cooperative interview.
That's how I...
Big brother is watching you.
Whatever.
In one of the more lucid moments of their conversation, Harrison talks about being pushed back by the band and not being given many opportunities to write. He said, and I quote, "Over the years, I had such a lot of songs mounting up that I really wanted to do, but I only got my quota of 1 or 2 tunes per album. And that way I would have had to have recorded about 100 Beatle albums just to get out the tunes I had in 1965. End of quote. Cavett asked if Harrison thought that he'd been held down by the other fellas. Harrison's response?
Well, very subtly, yes.
Yeah?
It was just the way things happened. It started off, I didn't write, they wrote, then I started to write.
And it was sort of trying to push in a bit.
Other commentators have noted how Lennon and McCartney kept him tied to the guitar for years, not wanting him to sing on stage. And even John Lennon once said that there was a time when Harrison's writing was embarrassing. He said his songs were not that good and nobody wanted to say anything. He just wasn't in the same league for a long time. That's not putting him down. He just hadn't had the practice as a writer that we had. Of course, few are in the same league as John Lennon and Paul McCartney, the esteemed Lennon and McCartney. But all George Harrison was saying was give George a chance. I guess it seemed for a long time that George Harrison just couldn't compete with the Beatles' Fab 2. Of course, Lennon was right in at least one respect. Harrison didn't have as much practice writing as he and McCartney had. By the end, though, George Harrison was right there with Lennon and McCartney in my mind. Let me know in the comments what you think about that. I think definitely.
Even now, you know I believe in how.
The way Harrison remembers it, he'd have to wait through 10 of their songs before they would even listen to one of his. And even then, he felt like he received very little positive feedback and there was really no enthusiasm for his offerings. However, Harrison's contributions to Abbey Road would vindicate him, at least in part. Something and Here Comes the Sun are 2 of his best songs, on par with the best of the Beatles had to offer overall, and the best of its time or any time, really.
Here comes the sun, I say, it's all right.
In hindsight, the success of Something really became a breakout moment for George Harrison's career as a songwriter. It was the only one of his songs to top the U.S. charts while he was with the Beatles.
Something in the way she woos me.
Now, the words to Something are incredibly simple. Yet when placed to music, they become so powerfully moving, emanating this glowing aura that draws listeners into the song's hallowed confines. Harrison's wife at the time, Patty Boyd, has said that George wrote something for her. He told me in a matter-of-fact way that he had written it for me. I thought it was beautiful, and it turned out to be the most successful song he ever wrote.
Somewhere in a smile, she knows.
I mean, Frank Sinatra, who knows a thing or three or four about songs, called it the greatest love song in 50 years.
It's one of the best love songs, I believe, to be written in 50 or 100 years, and it never says, I love you in the song, but it really is one of the finest.
That's really something. Sorry, I had to do it. Initially, Harrison was in agreement. In 1969, he told BBC presenter David Wigg who the song was about. Maybe Patty, probably. But as the years passed and George and Patty separated, George's stance gradually shifted from affirmation to denial. In 1976, he said it was about universal love. When you love a woman, he said, it's the God in her that you see. By 96, Harrison said, everybody presumed I wrote that about Patty because of the promotional film accompanying the release of the Beatles recording.
But now, you know I believe in how.
Of course, the music video, you'll remember, had combined footage of each of the Beatles with his respective wife.
You're asking me when my love grows.
But Harrison denied that Patty was the song's subject. At times, he also claimed its original intent was as a devotion to Lord Krishna. This is because he was deep into his study of Krishna consciousness at that time. Whatever the case, I'm just grateful. We're grateful that he wrote it. So George Harrison had the first line, something in the way she moves. But he had trouble coming up with the second. Now, he briefly considered attracts me like a pomegranate before coming up with attracts me like no other lover.
Attracts me like no other lover.
I think that was a little bit better lyric. Commenting on his process, he said, I usually get the first few lines of lyrics and a melody both at once, and then I finish the melody usually first. And then I have to write the words. But for something, the words would not come easily. I could never think of the words for it, he said. So he relied on help from John and Paul to help get his ideas flowing.
Style that shows me.
Biographers, commentators, and Beatlemaniacs alike have shared their thoughts on the meaning of this song. Some believe it reflects a doubt in striving to attain a particular goal, while others have called it an unabashedly straightforward and sentimental love song. Many have wondered if there is true intent to this song, but George Harrison has always been cryptic about its meaning. Like I said, he's changed who it was about, what he thought it was about so many different times. Kind of left to each of us to take from it what we will. Now, at this point in history, something has had such an enormous impact on our society. I mean, it's ascended to the highest echelons of the rock era pantheon. The single has garnered considerable commercial success and amassed unending critical acclaim. It went to number 1 on the US Billboard Hot 100, as well as number 1 in Australia, Canada, New Zealand, and West Germany. Also reached the top 10 in the UK, Sweden, Norway, and Ireland, pretty much everywhere. As I said previously, Frank Sinatra added something to his set list through the 70s and 80s. I mean, he recorded it. He called it the greatest in 50 years. But to Harrison's chagrin, he mistakenly attributed his authorship to Lennon and McCartney. Still, the accolade is spot on. The song is just infinite and timeless.
Attracts me like no other lover.
It's no wonder that it's been covered both professionally and casually more times than anybody can count. Behind Yesterday, it's actually the Beatles' most covered song.
All my troubles seem so far away.
It was, of course, covered by Joe Cocker in 1969, or written for him, however you want to look at it. Tony Bennett.
Don't want to leave her now.
There's Johnny Mathis, Dionne Warwick, Perry Como, Bill Medley did it, Frank Sinatra, like I said, Ray Charles, Elvis Presley, James Brown, Willie Nelson.
I don't want to leave her now.
Paul McCartney and Eric Clapton teamed up a few years ago and did it. Neil Diamond, Randy Jackson, Norah Jones, and recently Billie Eilish. Everybody has taken a stab at this song. The Foo Fighters song, Oh George, is said to be named after Harrison, with the solo based on something. In film and television, it's been featured on House Calls, American Idol, Across the Universe, and of course the movie Yesterday.
I don't need no other lover.
After George's death in 2002, Paul McCartney and Bob Dylan both played this live version of something as a tribute.
All I got to do is look at her.
Gosh, we miss George. What an amazing artist. Come Together, the opening track on Abbey Road, is credited to both Lennon and McCartney, though it is primarily brainchild of Lennon, of course. John wrote an early version during his and Yoko's 1969 bed-in. Timothy Leary, one of the leading public advocates for LSD, had paid them a visit and asked them for a favor. This time he was running against Ronald Reagan for governor of California, and he needed a campaign song. So Leary's slogan was "Come Together, Join the Party," a double entendre referencing politics and drug culture. So John picked up his guitar and began building on that phrase. Come together right now. Don't come tomorrow, don't come alone, come together right now over me.
Right now, over me.
All that I can tell you is you gotta be free.
One thing I can tell you is you got to be free.
So after reworking, a few more versions, Lennon recorded a demo and he gave it to Leary. Leary sent the song to alternative radio stations, throughout California. In the meantime, unknown to him, John had returned to England and started recording another version with the Beatles. Back in the States, Leary got arrested for drug possession, and he was sent to prison. It was there that he first heard Abbey Road on the airwaves. Later, he would protest to John that the song belonged to him. Lennon gave Leary a shrewd analogy in reply. John compared himself to a tailor who had created a suit. Leary was his customer. He had placed an order but never returned to pick it up. John said he simply sold it to someone else. I love that. Classic John Lennon. Now, attempting to definitively decipher the lyrics that come together is an exercise that has no clear-cut conclusion. The words reflect Lennon's taste for the nonsensical. After creating a demo for Leary, John wrote the rest of the lyrics in the studio. He did have some help from Paul and George, the latter of whom said what he offered was gibberish and completely removed from Leary's original message. Really, the lyrics appear to be John Lennon throwing together random thoughts and phrases. But of course, this hasn't stopped fans and commentators alike from trying to imbue meaning into each and every syllable. Some lines are fairly easy to make a case for. For instance, he got Ono sideboard, he won spinal cracker. That could refer to Yoko and her habit of giving asides during their interviews. Or perhaps it was her habit of standing on John's back to give his spine relief. Who knows? Even with some promising leads, it's hard to nail down the real source of inspiration, though many have tried. Some people have even suggested that each verse refers to a different Beatle. The Holy Roller was George, the spiritualist. He got Monkey Finger, he shoot Coca-Cola, was Ringo. Gotta be good looking because he's so hard to see, that was Paul.
Got to be good looking 'cause he's so hard to see.
And the Ono sideboard, he won Spinal Cracker remark, that refers to John, according to some. The source of two of Come Together's lines are fairly indisputable, however. Lennon's Here Come Old Flat Top, he come grooving up slowly.
Here come old flat top, he come grooving up slowly.
That sounds quite a bit like two lines from Chuck Berry's 1956 song, You Can't Catch Me. Berry saying, here come old flat top, he was moving up with me. It wasn't a coincidence, much like how Harrison's Something lifted lyrics from James Taylor's Something and the Way She Moves. Come Together was simply quoting an earlier work, or at least this is how John Lennon put it. After the release of the single, though, Morris Levy, the copyright holder of You Can't Catch Me, sued John Lennon for plagiarism. He asserted that Come Together sounded similar to Berry's song and that lyrical similarities were obvious. It was a claim that John strongly denied. Conflict was eventually resolved in October 1973 when John agreed to record 3 songs from Levy's catalog for his next album, Rock and Roll.
He wear no shoe shine, he got Trojan football.
Despite the conflict surrounding its creation, Come Together has established an expansive legacy since its inception. It started off by going to number 1 in the US, and there's also Australia, Belgium, West Germany, and breaking into the top 10 in Austria and the Netherlands. But this is just the tip of the iceberg. The song has been showcased in a bevy of films and TV shows and has been covered so many times throughout the years. It was used in Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, the movie from '78, WKRP in Cincinnati, Fame, Imagine, Moonwalker, A Bronx Tale, Armageddon, Across the Universe, Justice League, and recently in Cruella.
Mama? Maxie, I swear, Mama, I'm not... You know what?
Come Together also appeared in the Beatles Rock Band video game. That was in 2009.
One thing I can tell you is you got to be free.
It's been covered so many times. I mean, Diana Ross, Gladys Knight and the Pips, Tina Turner,
Over me.
Aerosmith,
One thing I can tell you is you got to be free.
John Lennon, Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson's, I like his version.
You in his arm till you can feel his disease.
Def Leppard, Soundgarden, Meatloaf, Robin Williams, and Bobby McFerrin did it together.
Who is me? Got to be a joker.
Tom Jones, Eurythmics, Bruce Springsteen and Axl Rose in 2011 did it together. I think that's in the top 10 of the most covered by the Beatles. With the double A side of Something and Come Together, the Fab Four didn't need to top anyone. At that point, they could only top themselves, and they did that all the time, continuously. The Beatles, John, Paul, George, and Ringo, they're a miracle. A miracle. They are proof to me that God exists. Now, that quote has been attributed to a few people, including Rick Rubin and Sean Colvin, but I'm pretty sure that all of us can lay claim to that idea. We've all had it at some point. We've thought it. And the Beatles transcend music. They are universal. They're something that makes us all come together. Leave us a comment about the Beatles and this double A-side pop culture phenomenon. What are your memories of this song? Something and Come Together, two of the greatest ever, together. Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to take a look at our Beatles episode about Penny Lane and Strawberry Fields Forever, which I consider to be the greatest double A-side of all time.
Very strange. Penny Lane is in my ear. About Strawberry Fields Forever.
We invite you to subscribe below, be a part of our community. Check us out on Patreon and our merch. The whole goal here, guys, is to keep the music alive, to keep talking about the greatest music ever, reminiscing about it and talking about it and keeping it alive. Until next time, 3 chords and the truth, my friends. Talk to you soon.